Hello, everyone. This is Coach Aaron Saft and the Running is Life podcast. The following episode was recorded on the Run Elite show by Andrew Snow. He's a fellow coach and runner, a great friend, and a really good interviewer. His podcast channel has, tons of subscribers, and he does a great thing, and he's just written a great book called Run Elite. I suggest picking up a copy. I'm going to put all of the links and everything in the show notes. The book is on Audible, but I suggest picking up a hard copy. There's a lot of things in his book that are just wonderful, from mindset to training, just so many great things from so many great coaches. Just a really comprehensive book on run training. It's fantastic. And this conversation, I wasn't sure where it was going to go, but there's just so much in here. Andrew asked so many good questions, and we talk about so many things, and he gives his input, which is just fantastic. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation with Andrew. And after that, I'll catch up with you guys and conclude this episode.
Hey, Aaron.
Hi. How are you, Andrew?
I'm pretty well. So you're in the middle of quite a feat of ultra running, the Grand Slam of 100s, 4 100s that are spaced roughly a month apart each. Yeah, and 3 down.
3 down. Yeah, 3 down. It's been quite a summer. It didn't start off as I anticipated. You know, everybody looks forward to racing Western States, and I was the same. And Western States was a really rough day. I don't know. Can't explain much why, but you know, it just seemed like everything went wrong, and I was just problem solving all day. That said, I still had a positive experience because I really enjoyed the course. I enjoyed being out there and just was really grateful for the opportunity. So I got to finish and was able to continue the slam. And then the next race was supposed to be 3 weeks later at the Vermont 100, which was canceled due to all of the flooding, which really threw a spin into the Grand Slam because the first race happened before Western States. So we had to wait about almost 10 days before the Grand Slam told us what to do. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, they had previously used Burning River in Ohio as a backup race. So Burning River actually offered us a discount code to register. So I figured, well, this was a previous, why not, just sign up. They're giving us a discount code. Hopefully I can use this one. And they came back and told us we could use any race we wanted, any 100 we wanted this year to compensate for not doing Vermont. So the only caveat was we had to approach the race and ask them if they were okay with us using their logo on our trophies, because the race logos appear on our Grand Slam trophies. Burning River said they were not okay with that. They wanted a written agreement with the Grand Slam. So the Grand Slam said, you're going to have to find something else. So I reached out to Scotty Coomer at 10 Junk Miles, and it was kind of the advice of one of the other runners that was in the same situation. He had reached out, and Scotty had let him in, so I did the same, and Scotty let me in. There were, I think, 3 of us that went to the Badger 100. It starts in Illinois and finishes in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And we did the Badger 100 in the place of the Vermont 100, which gave me 3 weeks to Leadville 100. And I just finished Leadville, just came off of that last weekend. It was a beautiful race. I really looked forward to that. It was challenging in so many ways with altitude and just trying to beat cutoffs. It's very much a running race. You have to really run that race, and that's what everybody kept stressing, which created some stresses. There's trying to get through 100 and making sure that you're on time. Basically the lowest elevation that you're at is 9,000 feet. And you go up over Hope Pass, which is over 12,000 feet. And it's an out and back, so you have to go back over Hope Pass, which was really challenging. But I'm happy to say I finished that one, and I'm on to Wasatch, which is now it's 2 weeks from today. So going to Utah in 2 weeks to race Wasatch for the finale of the Slam.
Awesome. When you had to make that shift from Vermont, did they give you a time frame? Like you have to get in 100 before the official third one?
They didn't. They said you could do it anytime this year, but in the fashion of the Grand Slam, I wanted it to be done, in the time frame that usually is the Grand Slam, which is over the course of the summer from June to September, beginning of September. So I think they were allowing people to do one afterwards. They didn't really quite state. I didn't ask because I was just gonna try to get it done in that time frame. So there are 6 of us left out of the 17 that started the slam. So Leadville took out 3, unfortunately. There were 3 DNFs from Leadville. Leadville had a really bad attrition rate. It was a 44% finishers rate out of 845 starters. So it's a really big race, like very tough. Yeah. So amazing to see. There was multiple athletes with like amputations. So I met one of the gentlemen above the knee amputation. Met another gentleman double above the knee amputation. Really amazing stories. Unfortunately, neither finished, but the one was in the lead man, the one with the single leg amputation, and he was in the 100-mile mountain bike race at Leadville the week before doing the Ironman, the Leadman, and somebody clipped his tire on one of the descents, and he crashed and broke a collarbone. So he was, poor guy.
And he was still out there.
He's still out there going for it. Yeah, it was incredible. Like so many cool stories. Just so many really cool runners and stories, and very motivating. Ken Kluber had a great speech at the beginning, which just really resonated with me about paying your debts, which is what got my butt going at halfway point, because I sat there and just a moment of doubt, I guess, because it was really so much to get over Hope Pass. I was just exhausted. Legs were cramping, fatigue was setting in, and I was just I was at a low point. And I sat there, and Ken said, "You got to pay your debts." And what he meant by that is, we owe it to others that have sacrificed for us to be there. My family, the family time it took to train, the finances it took to get there, my crew for their commitment to me and being there. Like, they were waiting for me in Twin Lakes, about 12 miles away. And when I thought about that and paying my debt, I said, I got to get him out of this chair. It's not going to be me that's going to take myself out of this race. It's going to be if I time out. So I made every effort to get back up and over. I think I actually ascended back up to Hope faster than I descended to the aid station.
Really? Wow.
And so I made up some time, and I made up a lot of time on the backside, but I think I went a little too hard.
So what mile did you approach the ascent each way?
So it's about mile 42 on the way out, and then maybe 44. Hold on, let me think. 38. It's 38. Yeah. So it's 38 because it's 12 over to Winfield. That's the turnaround point, and then 12 back. So 12 and a half. So yeah, it's quite the climb. You gain about 3,000 feet over the course of 4 miles on the way out, and then something pretty similar on the way back. So it's pretty intimidating, and it's a lot of two-way traffic at that point. That's when the race leaders start coming back. So it's kind of moving aside, and it really is a lot of disruption. On the way back, probably a little over maybe half to 3/4 of the way back, that I finally saw the last of the runners coming over, and then it was kind of clear sailing, so we can kind of concentrate again. A lot of times it was just kind of looking up, just making sure you're not in somebody's way.
Yeah. And really, like, looking up, that almost 1,000 feet per mile.
Yeah. It's steep. It really is. And then at that altitude, it was on the way. On the other side, it was hot too. It was it was pretty hot because it was just after midday, so it was a lot of factors there. And everybody was just like, you can tell that people like myself that wasn't as acclimated, and kept having to pull over, and I was just drinking off my bladder and trying to take some electrolytes and make sure I was okay, just making sure the heart rate didn't get too high.
Are you talking acclimated for the altitude or the heat?
For both.
For both.
Both.
Okay. How did you get acclimated for the altitude?
I really didn't have the opportunity to. I got there Tuesday. People were asking, did you get here early? And I was like, well, Tuesday was the best I could do. I really, it's hard in the slam because there's so many travel logistics, and it's really hard to sacrifice a lot of time to go and get acclimated. Utah will be between 5,000 and just under 10,000 is the highest point. We're 9,900 and something feet in Wasatch. So some pretty good altitude there still, not as much or not as hard, and you don't stay as high as you do in Leadville. But yeah, I just I was just relying on my fitness just to kind of carry me through, and just hoping I was recovered enough from Badger. I could tell my legs were a little tired. They didn't have as much pop as they usually do, and that could have also been attributed to altitude. But overall, I was pleased with my ability to run as much as I did there and get through the course. I was ahead of the 25-hour mark. The 25-hour earns you the big belt buckle. I was ahead of that for a long time up until about Hope Pass, and I was glad I was, because that's probably the difference in what my finish was.
Did they change that in the past? What did it used to be a 24? Because that's kind of like a standard.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know they on their website they have a really good history of the race, and I bought a book that's a history of the race, and they update it each year with finishing results. So it has like every year. So this year was the 40th anniversary, which was pretty cool. So I ran the 50th anniversary for Western States and the 40th anniversary for Leadville.
Perfect year.
Yeah,
all came together.
Year. Yeah, it was pretty cool. So, but yeah, I don't know if they changed that. The 30-hour cutoff it's tough. That's a tough cutoff, for a lot of folks. And I was really surprised by how many first-timers there were in the race when we went to the pre-race meeting, and they said, "How many first-timers do we have?" And the amount of hands that went up, I was very surprised, because that's a tough first 100.
Yeah. So, but it's got aside from Western States in the United States, is there? I mean, in my head, I think that's probably like the second most in-demand one. Would you agree?
Yeah, and there's a few that are growing to be, probably right up there with those. I would probably say that High Lonesome is becoming an event that people are seeking after. Another Colorado event, and Hard Rock would be another one. Yeah.
All right, so Hard Rock, when you're climbing up Hope Pass and feeling the deadness in your legs, like at a low point, you did Hard Rock just last year, wasn't it?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Yeah. So how did that climb compare? Because you got more pre-fatigue going into this one.
Yeah. Hard Rock was, the nice thing about Hard Rock is the cutoffs are so lenient. You have like 40 plus hours to finish that one. And so it wasn't as stressful. And I think that's what the combination was just in the back of my mind, just making sure that, I was going to get in under that 30-hour cutoff for Leadville. So it felt more pressing. Whereas Hard Rock, I just felt like I could, take my time. I knew I was fine on time. I was well ahead of everything. So I didn't feel that stress. But during Leadville, I think everybody kind of felt that stress. There wasn't a lot of chatter like you normally find in 100-milers. People didn't want to talk. They wanted to focus. There wasn't a lot of headphones. Everybody was really intent on their race and focused on their race, which rightly so. It was one of those races where if you took your mind off of it, you could be wasting some time. If you weren't focused on what was going on, you could slow yourself down just because you weren't doing what you needed to do. So I didn't wear headphones. You couldn't pick up a pacer till you got back to Twin Lakes, which was mile 68. And then you could have a pacer to the finish. Which was really nice because, like I said, it was just so quiet. I mean, there's people around, but like I said, a lot of people just didn't want to talk for long. And we were all doing different things. We all had our own race strategies. So it was, you'd stay with somebody for a little while and then they would disappear, so.
Wow. I had hiked to that about 10 years ago, the Colorado Trail, and going over Hope Pass. And I remember this one moment where I didn't run while I was out hiking for like 4 weeks, but I got to this point where I looked at a map and saw it was right around in Leadville. There was like this water supply, like a little lake that was 2 miles down this hill. So I thought, I'm going to take my pack off and run. I haven't run in like 3 weeks and I feel good. Like altitude, what? And I took my pack off and ran down this 2 mile stretch that was like okay because it was downhill, and thought I could run back up, and just like insanely gassed like I'd never been before just because of that altitude and not being used to it. So going up to 14,000 like multiple times in 100, I can like barely imagine what that's like. But recovery from those, it's like listening to you here, it sounds like that one is kind of like where it's like starting to get, not that it wasn't real before, but like recovery is kind of like major right now, and that really took a lot.
Absolutely, yeah. I went to go see Miriam Saloom yesterday.
Yep.
Muscles were definitely the sorest they have been, and I attributed that to that descent off of Hope Pass. I was really trying to get in before dark. I had watched a YouTube video from Hella. He's kind of a YouTube sensation, awesome runner. He did Western States this year as well. But he had a video. It was his first 100. It was Leadville. And I had watched his video and just to kind of get a sense for timing and aid stations. And he got back to Twin Lakes from coming down Hope Pass in the dark. And I wanted to get back just before that because he was set up really well for the finish. And I was like, all right, if I can get just before that, I'll be set up really well for the remainder of this race. So that was my goal, was getting down without having to turn my head.
And this was the first or second time?
This was the second time. So coming down, so that 4-mile descent of 3,000 feet of drop,
yeah,
I was booking, and I think that's what really, got my quads. I felt it like mile 90. My quads were like, well, we don't want to run right now.
Yeah.
So it became a challenge at the end of the race, and that's what I felt the most. So I saw Miriam yesterday, my physical therapist, and we went through things, and she kind of just combed through the muscles and kind of made sure everything was good, and they feel much better today. I did some good movement yesterday with my cross country kids. We did some mobility stuff, and I did it with them, and feel much better. So, just doing some walking right now. Just trying to create that mobility and kind of flush the muscles out and just get the blood.
So ever
flowing.
since Leadville, it's been
just walking,
recovering and walking.
Yeah.
How about leading up for the next 2 weeks? Listening to your body.
Yeah, listening to my body. I have a coach in Patrick Reagan, and he said this next one we just recover. Whatever the body needs, and I communicate that more to him, and just say not ready, or I'm good. So usually, what I've typically seen is about 10 days, and my body's ready to run again. I've done 7, and I can tell I'm not quite there yet. Able to run, but the paces are much slower, and so it's about 10 days where my paces start to get back down to normal. Seen that in HRV too. Looking at HRV scores, I can see recovery scores. It's about 10 days. So that rule of thumb that a lot of people say, take a day for every 10 miles you raced, it's pretty close. Yeah. So this one may take me a little bit longer, and I'm okay with that. As I was telling you, I've got a trip to Italy, so it's I'll be happy to just run around the Amalfi Coast and enjoy the scenery. There's not much, obviously, fitness I'm going to gain in this next few weeks, so it's just kind of maintenance. Yep. And not overdoing it is the big thing. Just trying to stay healthy. I don't feel anything right now that's problematic that I'm worried. Like, I got to be careful about this. Even though, like I said, I had some cramping and stuff like that, the needling yesterday really helped kind of get me going again. Yeah. Muscles feel pretty good, so we're getting there. Yep.
Okay. So physically, you've run 200 miles even, so I have confidence in you that you can just hammer it out physically. But if we bring it back to the mental, and then even a step before that into like the emotional, are you looking forward to being at the tail end of this and having like the next one be the celebration?
Yeah, I'm not looking through it. I'm looking at it, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, each one has its own challenges, and they've all presented something unique. Leadville, obviously, that had some really unique challenges, and Utah will as well. It's like Utah's going to be the most temperature swing. Daytime could be 90, nighttime could be 30 or below. So it's got a lot of challenges for gear. And the other part of Wasatch is that crew access points are very limited. There's 2 in the first half and 1 in the second half. So it'd be a lot of drop bags and reliance on drop bags, which is fine. I'm prepping for that. But looking at each of those parts and trying to analyze what I'll need and what to estimate what's it gonna take at that point. What do I need? And do I need certain gear? Do I need certain food? So just prepping for that is, that's a challenge too. Yeah, looking at it and saying, what do I need to succeed? And then, yeah, it's exciting. It's the last one. We have 36 hours for this one. It's, it is a hiker's course. There's a lot more vertical gain. This one has the most vert of any of the ones I've done, which is my favorite.
Yeah.
So I look forward to that part of it. So yeah, it's going to be a neat one.
What's the gain on this one?
Oh, this one, I think it's 20. It's around 25. I'd have to look up the exact number, but it's around 25,000.
Okay. I'd like to hear a little bit about your training, especially with ultras. I mean, if you look at some of the great ultra, I'm thinking of contrasting Camille Herron and Giannis Kuru right now with their long runs. And, Camille, she does regular 20-mile runs, I think every 10-day cycle or so, but pretty high volume, but not long runs that are crazy long unless she's racing, versus Giannis, who would do never more than, I think he said 12K in a session, but would race huge races pretty frequently. So the difference between high mileage with sort of long runs or very long runs, what have you found and not just with the Grand Slam, but over the last several years or so.
Yeah.
In your training, can you talk about comparing those two?
Sure. Excuse me. So let me preface this by saying I'm going on 46. So my training has evolved to understand that my body can't withstand a lot of the volume I used to do. I've recognized that doing too much volume or too much intensity with volume, my body won't recover as quickly. So what I've done is that if the focus is on volume, then I focus on volume, and it's my long runs. I think my longest, I had to do a 50-mile qualifier for Vermont. So that was the furthest I went in training. Now, would I have done that 50-mile or otherwise? I'm not sure. I don't think I would have needed it. I feel comfortable in my endurance capacity. So when people look at what they're doing during training is how comfortable do they feel with their endurance? And that's something I often ask my runners, do you feel confident that you are okay with, doing distance? Do you feel you need that physically and mentally? Is it worth it to take that time to do it and recover from it? And like I said, that 50-miler, I had to do it. In retrospect, I didn't have to do it because Vermont didn't happen. But
yeah.
In order to have my entry there, I did. So, but I did a 50K in training. And I think 50K for me is about all I would have needed prior to Western States. Just one 50K. And then the rest, I'm like Camille. I would do a 20-miler every now and again. I'm comfortable with, just going out for a 20-miler and doing that, and it doesn't have to, Western States, it was an interesting training because of all the downhill. So we tried to make it so that there was a good amount of up and a good amount of down in, my training runs. But overall, no, I don't think high volume is as necessary as a lot of people make it. I think some people overdo it too frequently, and that's what leads them to fatigue and overtraining. And so it's very sensible to understand yourself and where you're at and how you're feeling, and be honest with that. If your paces are slowing down, especially look at your volume and intensity. Are you doing too much? Those are good questions to ask. I noticed I was slowing down in my paces, and I said to my coach, I said, hey, my paces are getting slower. I'm getting, tired and not recovering as quickly. Let's diminish some of the intensity that we have and just focus on the aerobic because, I think we're just trying to do too much. So we pulled away from intensity in my training and just refocused on the aerobic part of it, and that's when I started getting my paces back down. And again, we reduced volume as well, just to kind of make sure I was recovering. And then in between Western States and Badger is where I really started to find my paces coming back down. and I felt really comfortable again at some of the paces that I hadn't seen in a while. So I think I needed that recovery. I may have been overtrained for Western. I think the block was just too long. So I think I was going at it for too much time.
You have a big background of running. You've been running most of your life. You ran in college. You ran in high school too?
I did.
Yeah. So I think Frank Shorter said something like this, like that. Well, he says consistency is key, which we've heard before, but like over the long term, like over decades. And he told an amazing story a couple years ago where he went into all of his training logs and he just added up all the miles and divided it by the total amount of days for like 20 years and got a number that was like something like 18 or something every day for 20 years. And it seems like when you ask your runners, how comfortable are you with your endurance, that perhaps it comes more, I mean, would you think that it comes more from what you've done over your lifetime and not as much as what you've done over this season or even the last like 2 or 3 seasons? But like if you ran high volume for 10 years, now you kind of maybe don't need to and you can do those bigger runs, or even possibly vice versa. It's like there are two components and you can't really build both at the same time.
Right.
So that's where longevity really comes in.
Yeah. So looking at a runner's history is really significant, especially in ultra. You know, how comfortable have they been over the long term with high volume? You know, like what is their history with ultra, right? Are they new to it? Are they experienced with it? Because, you know, those that are more experienced with it, like they're the ones that like they tend to overdo it because they've been at it for so long, and they're the ones that are like, you know, I want to do 400s this year, and you know it becomes more of a point of recovery rather than finding a training cycle. Yes, looking at the overall picture and their history, I think, is a bigger piece of the pie. Those that are more new to ultra and new to running, then they may need a little bit more endurance, and you know, you may have to be a little bit more creative with their training patterns, not just kind of throwing a 50 miler in there because you want to force something so they have that experience. It may just be, okay, so over the course of, you know, this week, we're going to try to include some bigger runs, and that may include a 50K and a 30K that we break up over the course of the week, depending on their, you know, actually their life schedule. But I would rather see them, you know, do a bigger volume week than one single volume run. So they get the experience, they get the volume, but they don't get as much fatigue either. A lot of times I find that the newer runners, if I have them go out and just do a 40 or 50 mile run, it takes them a lot longer to recover from. And we waste a lot of training time. I don't want to say waste, but we let them recover so that we don't get them injured or tired. So, you know, looking at the bigger picture and their history is, I think it's huge.
Yeah, I see this with people who are doing their first 50K or the first 50 mile or the first 100. It's like there's this belief that if I've only done a marathon, I've got to run a 50 mile before I run 100. And so they like want to push and do that 50. But there's utility in that, I think. But the recovery is, like you're saying, going to be huge. But also there's like something magical in ultras where it's like, what is the limit? You can go 100, you can go 200. I mean, how far can you go?
Right.
So if you run the 50 and that's your first one, it's probably going to be the hardest run you've ever done. And then it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around, can I really do double that? And so I think sometimes staying away from those runs that you think you have to do because it's a stepping stone and just hurtling right over them, and you can just go. And in some ways, the longer stuff can be easier than the shorter stuff just because of the pace.
And we do a lot of time-based training so that they don't get wrapped up in a number that's mileage. And like, especially if it's trail running, I don't want them to feel like, you know, gotta go out for a 20-mile run. This is going to take me like, you know, 6+ hours. Like, that's a lot of time, you know, a lot of time on feet. Like, I'd rather them just say, all right, I'm going to go out for a 4-hour run, and, you know, whatever it is, like, I'm going to spend 4 hours on my feet. A lot of times that works out better, especially for my trail runners, because they're not as focused on a distance, and they're getting that time on feet. They're still getting good stress, you know, good training adaptation. So, and I don't have to recover as much. So it works out a lot of different ways, you know. And they'll say, well, you know, like my longest run. I said, but you know, your longest run was also whatever, this many hours. Like you spent that much time on your feet. Your body knows like what that feels like to be on your feet for that long. So, and it's probably at an intensity that was much faster than what they're actually going to do in an actual race.
And probably flat too.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's my favorite thing about doing a long run based off of time is I feel licensed to be able to just go up and down hills and get like no miles, but lots of vert. And
Absolutely.
if you're trying to satisfy the logbook, you can't really satisfy the vert nearly as much. And for races like this, that really matters.
And it's I mean, Strava kind of creates that too, right? Like they worry what's going to post, like what's going to be on there. And that's something we talk about too, is just kind of getting over Strava and getting over what your numbers say like on there. It's people look at, they're going to like it either way.
Scroll, like, scroll.
Yeah, they're not really worried about like how far did you go.
They're probably worried about how far they went.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Strava game, I mostly have stayed away from that. I'm on it now. I haven't logged into it in months. It's just linked with my Coros.
Right.
But it was an issue. I only got on Strava because there was a local vertical challenge for a month. And I'm like, oh, that's fun. And I was training for Tahoe at the time. Okay. So it's like, let's get in some vert. And I started cranking with the vert like never before. And things were going really well. And I was like getting on there daily, looking at the ranks. And it's like, oh, I'm number 2. Oh, I'm number 1. Oh, I'm number 3. And getting competitive. And then going out and doing kind of stupid stuff. Like not even running. I just want to get the vert. So there's this nice hill right here.
Right.
And I would go out in the evening and put an audiobook on and just walk up and down the hill. And it was kind of fun until until week like 3.5. And I was out on like an easy run with a friend in Black Mountain. And there was this like incredible pain behind my ankle that I never felt before. And slowed down a little bit. I had to let him go and hobble in, and I strained my tibialis posterior like really bad. Went on crutches for a couple days after that. 3 weeks off, and luckily I was able to come back and keep training. But that dang injury, it reared its head like a month ago, and this was like a year and a half ago, and it came from the vertical challenge, but the vertical challenge was like this thing that I was trying to do on Strava. And it ended up, if I could change like one thing in the last 5 years of my training, I mean, I don't really want to change anything, but hypothetically, I wouldn't do that again. Like get on these challenges. They're kind of fun, but
they are.
Maybe save it for the race or something.
Yeah.
It's like,
I know it's difficult because there's all the segments and people want the crowns and they chase the crowns or see how, if they can PR. They could be good challenges, and sometimes when people when they're, I don't want to say obsessed, but when they're really interested in those things, I may include it in like a workout and just say, hey, let's do this, and then you can chase this segment during this workout, because so service multi-purpose. I don't do it too often, but I know some of those people are like, they're really into Strava, and it means a lot to them. So I try to include those things when I can. But yeah, I'm not. I don't really do much with Strava myself. I use Training Peaks with my athletes, so I'm on a platform enough that I don't really want to spend a ton of time on another platform doing something very similar. It's not that I don't want to see what my friends are up to. I can always search them and see, what they've been doing, how they're doing, or I can just text them or call them and say, "How you doing?" But yeah, I understand the platform. It is a cool social tool, and it is a good way to kind of track your own. It's a good way to have a training log, a digital training log, and kind of record your thoughts. And so there is value to it, but I do think some people use it the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's got that kind of longevity. It's been around for a while.
Yeah.
Years ago, I switched. Used to run with a Garmin. Then I worked for TomTom for a while and used that. Now Coros. So my training logs, they're like this platform, and I got to log into what's my Garmin password from 10 years ago. But there it is on Strava. Just go back, and it's I keep it for that reason too. It's just like keeping track, just a log.
Right.
But that's kind of about it. How have you found sleep to be critical in the times between? Of course, like more sleep, good. But I'm wondering how much sleep you actually are kind of getting. I find that even with serious runners, they get like little sleep oftentimes. And if you can like really up it, I see elite runners sleeping almost ubiquitously. I wrote about this in here as well. These are marathoners mostly, and some ultra marathoners who really are sleeping 11 or 12 hours a day, and it's like 8 or 9 at night plus a nap because of the high volume.
Sure.
But outside of the really like elite Olympic level world, I don't really see that often. So how does your sleep? Do you try to be? Are you very consistent?
Yeah.
And could you just speak about that?
Sure. My kids just started school again, so it creates a habit for me. My daughter has been getting to bed at 9, which is fantastic, and my son, we try to get him in bed, by 10. But usually it's my wife that puts him to sleep because she can go to bed later, just because she has the the capacity. I'm pretty tired by 9:30, 10 o'clock, so I try to be in bed, laid down by 10 each night, and try to sleep. Usually our alarms go off at 6 a.m. So I try to get 8 hours during the night. Sometimes, like this morning, I naturally woke up at like 5:15 and my body was just awake. So I usually get somewhere between 7 and 8 hours a night. In the afternoon, if just before practice, if I'm sleepy, I'll probably get a 20 to 30 minute nap if I need it. Some days that doesn't work out, and some days I don't need it. But I'm on average 7 to 8 hours plus maybe like a 20 to 30 minute nap. But that's pretty consistent. I'm a big believer of getting the same pattern each night, going to bed at the same time each night, it's tough when you travel, obviously. Like when I went to Colorado, that's a 2-hour time change, and Utah will be the same, and then 6 hours in Italy. So that's going to be disruptive, and I'm going to do what I can to still get my 8 hours, and it's going to be difficult to come back and then switch into the East time zone for a night and then go to the Mountain Standard for the next few.
So that's going to be like, is that an 8-hour difference then? Like
yeah,
popping over.
Yeah. Yikes. So that's going to be a challenge. But sleep it's vital. When I was, let's see, it was 2022 was the last year I did Hellbender as the RD, and I was trying to do my coaching. I was trying to train. I was trying to coach at the high school level, be a dad, be a husband, and get ready for Hellbender. Prep for getting Hellbender put on. So my attentions were everywhere. I found myself opening, kind of getting up about 4 a.m. Each morning, going to bed at 10, getting up at 4. So I was getting maybe 6 hours. Some nights it was even worse. Like I'd have to stay up later to get other stuff done. And I started noticing a decline in my performance everywhere. Mentally, physically, it was just, I knew I was burning the candles at both ends, and I was doing my detriment to myself, but I had no other choice, unfortunately, because of how much I had on my plate. And that's what made me realize I was trying to do way too much and had to give up Hellbender, because it was just, as much as I loved putting it on, it was just too much for me. And it created too much stress, mentally, physically, and just put too much demand on me. So this year, without having to put on Hellbender, it was infinitely better. I was able to not have to get up so early, not have to do so much, and my life stress was so much better. My training was better. So high school coaching is still a tough demand. It's 2 to 6 each night, so 4 hours of my day was high school training.
When did you start that?
Training the high school kids?
Yeah.
I started the middle school probably 5 years ago. Yeah, I started training at the middle school about 5 years ago, and then I switched over to the high school last year for track. So between those guys here, I've trained high schoolers previously, but here I started with the middle school about 5 years ago. Middle school is a lot less commitment, which like our cross country practice goes from like 3 to 4:30. But the high school, it's like I got to get there and set things up and get things ready, and then obviously clean things up. So it takes a little bit more time with the track. And the new commitment was winter track, doing winter track with the kids. So it was winter and spring. It's I think the balance is I get so much joy out of it. It's like it's such a a great part of my day. I look forward to it. It's a positive piece of life, even though there's a lot to it. There's a lot of moving parts in running a track team and coaching all these athletes. But it's something I enjoy. So I continue to do it.
So in a way, you've taken. I mean, you were super busy with Hellbender and everything else that you just said. But now, I mean, you're still pretty busy. That's a 4-hour commitment most days, and weekends you have meets sometimes, right?
Correct.
So you're still maybe as busy, like sometimes maybe even more, but it sounds like it's more energizing to you.
It is.
Because you had your priorities. You followed the thing that lit you up.
Right. It's, as I said, it's more uplifting. I find more joy in it. Not that it, like, I'll say with Hellbender, like, the joy came in when people finished. Like, that's when the joy came. That was the moment. But the rest of it was just stress. Like, it was a hard process. I didn't enjoy the stresses that came along with, setting up the race and putting it together, which is hard. Like, that should be fun and enjoyable. But working with so many entities and trying to put it together was just really difficult, and something that I really just didn't enjoy that part of it. So having track and just really enjoying, I would say probably 95% of everything I do at track. There's that 5% always that's just like, all right, I could do without that, but I'll deal with it because the other 95% of this is just amazing.
And you're still finding time to. I want listeners to hear this too. Is like you're still finding time to get the appropriate sleep, 7 to 8 hours. Basically every night plus the occasional nap. And I think that's a lot more than the average person gets. I don't know what the average person gets, but I always ask my clients, and it's
right.
That would be impressive if they hit what you're hitting.
Something we track as well, because it kind of alerts them. Like, when I say, well, look back at your sleep pattern. Like, it's, like, that's probably why you're not feeling as great. There's other factors that contribute to it, but when we say, like, all right, you just did this huge run, look at the next night, you got 4.5 hours sleep, that's probably why you feel the way you do. So it's good to give them that visual, as part of their training log. So, if you're not tracking your sleep, it's a good number just to kind of record. And sometimes, like you mentioned, like Garmin, I know Garmin, like, it uploads, your sleep patterns to the app itself, and then with Training Peaks, it uploads those metrics right up to Training Peaks, so we can see that in their metrics. And then my Koros wearers, my Sunto wearers, I just have them look at their app and kind of just give me a ballpark of what was the overall sleep.
So you're using Koros and Sunto in tandem with each other?
Oh, no. I'm just saying the multiple users, like my athletes.
Your athletes.
Yeah,
okay.
They may use, various watches. So the Sunto and Koros don't upload automatically like the Garmin does. The Garmin will upload your metrics.
Okay.
Apple Watch does too. And like I said, I use Training Peaks, and that's, again, why I don't use Strava as frequently, because my stuff goes to Training Peaks as well, and I can record stuff in Training Peaks myself. Just another platform, another way to do things. However you're comfortable doing it, it's up to you guys. I mean, I know people that I had athletes that were like, I just write it down. I'm like, all right, well, just take a picture with your phone and send it to me.
Yeah.
The
good old days of the paper log.
Yeah.
Do you hold on to those? Do you have some from ages
ago?
Yeah.
I still have all mine from high school, and my coach gave me my college training logs, which is cool.
So cool. Yeah. You ever look back at them and just like kind of pick a run from 20 years ago and see if you remember it, and like you actually remember?
Yep.
It's really crazy, right?
Yeah.
And it's like trying to find a run that you don't remember is kind of hard.
Yeah.
But you can't like actively pick them out, but they really do stick in your mind, even just like normal runs.
Yeah.
It enriches your life so much.
It does.
So what would you say to one of your clients if someone came to you and you asked them about their sleep and their training, and they just said that, well, I get 6 hours some nights and it's like 5, 6, and they say that they just don't have time because they're a kid, and no, they have kids, not their kid, and they work a lot, et cetera, and there's like the list of the reasons why they can't, but we all have the same 24 hours in a day.
Yeah.
I can appreciate people are busy, but it's like where your priorities go. So
Absolutely.
you've shifted your priorities in order to be able to have that energy. But what's like an initial approach that you take with someone who brings that up? What kind of digging would you do to find?
Yeah, I had to simplify, and I use myself as an example as to how can you simplify your life? What is the things that you're doing that take up time that really don't need to? And a lot of times that's like browsing on social media, watching television.
Yeah.
You know, like these. I know they're great because it's that downtime in your day. We all need that downtime, but like, how much is that really taking up? And is that taking up enough time that it could be detracting from your sleep? Mm-hmm. And are you doing it right before bed? You know, so you've got a deadly combination right there, right? You're on a blue light device right before bed. So, you know, thinking about these things and what can you cut out? What are things that, you know, can add to your sleep, right? So just being more efficient with your time that's what we look at is, you know, what are those extra things?
Mm-hmm. At the end of the day, like before bed, I think a vast majority of people, myself included, I get sucked into this, is like you're just on a screen. Mm-hmm. And there's often times where I'll just turn my phone off. Mm-hmm. And even if like the TV's on or something, at least it's far away and it's not hyper stimulating, you can turn it off. But trying to do something that is like relaxing at night, like I'll play piano or read or journal, and I'll tell myself I want to do that, and oftentimes successful, but sometimes it just feels like that doesn't sound fun. It kind of like the other one is like just a little bit, and you tell yourself, oh, I just got to check this metric, I just got to check whatever, and then you're like sucked into it. So how far back do you rewind that in your day in order to be successful going to bed at 10 o'clock? When do you start changing things?
My day is pretty laid out ahead of time. Like I'm really meticulous about like what I'm doing and when I have time to do it. What do I need to accomplish? So I look at what needs to be accomplished, set that out for my day, and set my intention to get it all done. And then I fill in and say, okay, you know, I've got a break here. What am I going to do with that time? And then so during that time, that's my downtime. I may take my dog for a walk. That may be a time I check social media. But having that daily kind of structure, it really helps me. And a lot of times my runners say, well, I just didn't know when I could fit in my strength training, right? Mm-hmm. And I say, well, you have to set the intention, right? There's got to be the intention to do it, and you have to know when you have the time to do it. So if you're looking at your day and you're setting it up, you know, look at what is mandatory, right? Like time with your kids, right? Time to work, right? So you've got all of that, and then you say, okay, now I need to fit in my run. Where's the run going to go? That's, you know, next priority usually. Mm-hmm. And then, okay, now where do I have time to strength train? And, you know, I always tell my runners, it may be that you have to break up the strength session and do a piece in the morning and a piece in the afternoon or a piece in the evening. You know, just do it when you have time. Like, don't feel that it has to be one sit down session. I'm not trying to give you a HIIT workout, right? Like, we're not doing a high intensity interval session here with strength training. Let's just get it in when we can. Or, you know, let's move it. If today is not the best day, let's move it. So I want to give my runners, I tell them, you know, your schedule is not concrete, right? Like I had one yesterday that was like, I just, today wasn't the day for this workout. And I said, that's cool. We call it the audible. Let's move it. Let's put it somewhere else. And sometimes that's tough. You know, I had one the other day that was like, hey, can we move this run somewhere? And I was like, well, based on your week, we can't. This isn't a vital run. Right. You know that you're okay if we don't get this run in. Let's just keep moving forward with the schedule, because I don't want you to be stressed about trying to fit this in when it's just not going to work for your week. So, you know, having those conversations, I think it puts them at ease a little bit more, because I think a lot of runners get hung up on that, like, oh my God, I didn't get this in. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if we're doing that consistently over time, then something has to change. But if it's just once, you know, every 4 or 5 weeks, that's not the biggest thing. You know, it's not the worst thing. Even if it's just like a long run, you know, like missing one long run because something came up, not the worst thing in the history of the world.
Yeah. Based on their week. That's why, you know, like a template, a cookie cutter plan, you know, doesn't account for that. And it depends on like the priority, right? So if the priority is number one, then screw everything else and you get it done. And there's like this mindset that I don't think a lot of runners really feel good about or like adapt long term, but it's just like in the culture. I call it Rocky mindset, where it's like push hard and just grind and just get it done. And we believe, oftentimes, I think that when it comes to it, we can grind it out hard and we can push hard. But if that's the tool that we use to get the training done, then what about the other things in your life? It's like, but I'm supposed to be grinding. But like grinding with what? Is this what you want? If it doesn't lift you up, then it's going to just crash. You're going to plateau. You're going to get injured. Something's going to happen.
Sure.
So shifting that focus to like, you're not a runner. You're a person who runs. And you've got to, like, in that hierarchy, know kind of what the priorities are.
Yep.
So when you start, like for your day, you set an intention and you know what's mandatory. And then I'm not sure how much of it is scheduled, but I'm curious with your downtime, you're choosing a block of time that is for downtime, and you can allow yourself to whatever, derp on social media as long as you want, like in that time. So you like give yourself permission to.
Yep.
And does that take the pressure off or like the guilt off? Like if someone were scrolling for hours and hours but doesn't want to, it's like this downward energy.
Yeah.
But if you allow yourself to for a finite period of time,
Yep.
it takes the pressure.
It does. Yeah. I set a notepad next to my bed. Bart Smith gave me this tip because my mind was whirling at this one point and in time, and I was my mind just constantly wanted to think about things that I had to do, and I was getting restless at night. It was disrupting my sleep because I constantly woke up like, oh, what about this? You know. So I put this notepad next to my bed, and it allowed me to write things down if I thought about something. You know, like I could just jot a note down just so I'd remember, and then my mind would be at peace. And I'll tell you, over time, I've had to write less and less because I'm becoming better at knowing, you know, during my daytime things that I need to do, and if I can write those down during the day rather than worrying about them at night.
Yeah.
So when I go to bed, my mind can stay at ease because I know, there's every once in a while something's going to pop up and I'll have to write a note just because like, oh, I forgot about this, you know. But for the most part, it's I have used my phone, I use notepads, I really want to make sure that my mind can stay at peace at night. Because that's, I think, a lot of the times what disrupts us is that our minds are still engaged. It's constantly going because we're not allowing it to rest because we're putting it in this like stimulated state that like, oh my God, I got to get this done. Whereas if you write it down and then you're like, all right, it's written down. I don't have to think about that right now, and I'm not going to do it right now. That's for sure. I'm going to go to sleep. So allowing yourself that and recognizing that when you write things down, you'll remember and you'll get to it, but you just got to figure out when. And that's, when I set my intentions, I'd be like, all right, today's the day I got to fit that in, like from my honey to-do list, right? Like my daughter's like, you got to move my shelf. And I'm like, I know I do. Yes, sweetie, I have it on the list. It will get done on Saturday when dad has time. So, it's everything in its place and everything in its time. And it took a long time to come to that and be okay with it, and not just like, everything has to be done today. For a long time, that's what it felt like, is like everything had to get done today. So I feel like I can relax, but there's always something to do.
It never ends.
It never does not. So I had to recognize that, and come to terms with the fact that not everything can get done today. And once I did, then I was much more at peace, much more relaxed. So, it's finding your priorities and recognizing what isn't on fire, what doesn't need to be put out right now. You know? And that's taken a long time to recognize.
There's this idea of there's 4 categories of tasks that we can do, and they're either urgent or not urgent. House is on fire, urgent. Checking Facebook, not urgent. And there's things that are important and not important, like time with your family versus whatever. Sure. And then the cross section of all those. So there's like 4, and without capturing things and writing them down, it's really easy to let the things that are not important but urgent, that's like the category that will rob you of your time, but that energy. Because if it feels urgent, you're like stimulated, hard to sleep. I got to do this, and I didn't. These small things, but they're not really important. And by like capturing them, I use the term capture because there's this course that I took a couple years ago from Tony Robbins, which was great. It's called Time of Your Life, and it teaches you how to basically do what you're talking about here. Take all of the things that you want to do in your life in the different categories and how to actually like get them done so you're not dying and you're doing the things that are important. And there's this thing called the capture list, which you can use for the day or the week. I have a weekly capture. So like on the weekend when I'm with my girlfriend, I just got this piece of paper that I start writing down, just as you said, when something comes up for work, instead of talking about it incessantly, which sometimes I still do. Sorry, Anna. Just write it down. And then when Monday comes around, I've got this list. And it's like personal things, maintenance of the house, running goals, client things, and it's like everything, all this discombobulated. But I don't have to worry about what were those 10 things I thought about. It's just all right there. Yeah. And then you can just use that as a list to start checking things off. But there's like even more power in doing what you said you do next is like knowing what the priorities are. So you can of course batch those things, but then knowing what the main outcomes for different areas of your life. So those like main outcome for running and with clients and administration and I no matter how busy I am, relationship's still important too. So the relationship like date night or whatever it is gets put on there, even if it means all these other admin things that would be scrambling your brain don't get done. And like scheduling the time for those. And then what I found is like a lot of those other capture items, all the small things, you carry them over from day to day to day or week to week and keep writing them down and they never get done. And so it kind of shows that a lot of those things, they weren't really that important.
Sure.
And if you carry it over for week after week and you still didn't do it, but nobody died, it's kind of like either do it or let yourself off the hook, get rid of it, or even outsource it.
Yeah.
Do you use any kind of outsourcing, virtual assistants, housekeepers, anything to just kind of like give you more time and take those things away?
I mean, I use my Google Calendar. You know, that's probably my biggest tool between that and the Notepad. Mm-hmm. And then I use Calendly for my call schedule, which just allows me to send my runners a link and then they can schedule calls with me. Rather than, trying to create like a call schedule and they're emailing me and trying to coordinate, all this and that. So I've been using a lot more digital tools to help me stay organized because Calendly goes right to my Google Calendar as soon as they create it, which is really nice. So, just trying to be more efficient with, what I'm better at, and that's just the coaching piece, right? Like rather than, say this, that, and the other thing and have a million different things out there. It's nice to have one place for, scheduling calls, and then that goes to my calendar, and I can just look at my calendar for what's going on. And usually I add to my calendar, like, got a podcast with Andrew, so, and then I can see like where my calls are, and then I know what practice time is, and, so that's kind of how I fill in my day. Just looking at the calendar and making sure I plug in everything, that's on there. And then if I forget, obviously it's going to be somewhere else on a piece of paper that says, hey, don't forget, you got this, and then I can add it. So, yep. But now just using those digital tools, kind of help me in that way. And Training Peaks has helped a tremendous amount in that as well. And I keep coming back to that. I've got no real affiliation with Training Peaks. It's just the platform I use, like I said. But communication through there is fantastic, and I try to tell my runners.
The link below. Get your errands. Yeah.
Right. So no, it's my athletes, they can communicate through there, and I encourage them to. Like sometimes they'll message me, and I'll be like, hey, let's this is appropriate just to keep in Training Peaks, just so we have it in one place. Like I don't want to forget this, because if you're sending it to me in like Facebook Messenger, for instance, it's in a totally different spot and I may forget. It's like an athlete, texted me the other day, oh, don't forget, I'm on vacation. I was like, well, that's something you can put into Training Peaks as a note to remind me. Otherwise, like this text, you text me while I'm in Colorado. I may not see this and remember, but thankfully the person texted me again and said, just remember. And so I just reminded them, it's cool. Just, like I said, add a note to Training Peaks. That's what it's there for. So using each piece to its fullest capacity is, I try to encourage people to use the technology that we have. And that way it's easier on both ends and more organized and a little bit more fluid.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's go back to the Grand Slam. And just talking like from a broad level, top level down, like 30,000 foot view, how has you're very experienced as an ultra runner. You've been at this a long time, and you've done some major things. How has this pursuit just changed you, just internally, about how you view
Sure.
this life running?
Yeah. It's interesting because, having a competitive background, I didn't want that to be a piece of this. Like there's the goal of finishing it, obviously, which is a competitive piece, but I didn't want my my history with running to become too obsessive in this process, because I wanted to enjoy it, and if I went into each race being like, oh, I need to run this time, I just felt that was going to diminish the experience, and who knows if I'll experience any of these races ever again. And so I wanted to, just really take that opportunity and just step back and say, let's enjoy this. And that's, the way I approached Western States, as I said earlier. Would I have liked to have run sub 24 and got that silver buckle? Of course, that would have been awesome, but that wasn't the day I had. And I knew that going into it, that there was the possibility that wouldn't happen. I recognized it. And when the time came, I was okay with it because I had recognized that fact. When Badger came along and I was in seventh place overall, and I was moving up, and I was like, do I need to be moving up with Leadville 3 weeks away? And the answer was no. I didn't need to be moving up, so I just realized that, and I was like, back off. That's okay. We're not here for the purpose of getting, into the top 5, into the top 3. That's not what my intentions are. And then with Leadville, obviously, like I talked about, trying to get the sub 25 buckle. Again, if I had the day, that would have been great. But, when I went up Hope Pass, I quickly realized, it would take a lot to stay on that pace. And I was like, that's not what I need to do to get to Wasatch healthy and ready to run. So just staying present in each race was something that was, I really had to be cognizant of. Recognizing, there is another race behind it. And that's really hard, because you want to be present in each race, but you also have to remember that there's one to follow. Now, Wasatch being the last race, the goal is to finish. There are all these really cool buckles for different times and stuff like that. But again, the intention is, finish, get to the finish, whatever that takes. And that's a new intention for me, is, just finishing. Whereas, in the past, I will say, UTMB, Hard Rock, the goal was just to finish. And I think as I've gotten older, I've become better at saying it's okay just to finish this. It's, when we were in mile 200 of Bigfoot, and Morgan said to me, he's like, 10th place is right in front of you. I said, that's nice. As he's like, dude, if we can just throw down some 1030s, you'll catch 10th place. And I said, 1130s is all my body got, man. I told you, I just want to finish this thing. It's I recognized that 1030 was it was too much, I was pushing myself too much, and it was, it wasn't the right thing to do. So as I've gotten older, I think I just got wiser about, what my body has and what I can do, and not over pushing it, so that I can enjoy, the next few days with my family, and not be totally trashed and worn out and, worse human being and worse father. So, but I've grown to enjoy it more that way. I really am enjoying the process. I'm enjoying each race. I'm looking forward to Wasatch. I'm looking forward to being out there and sharing time on the trail with, my fellow competitors and with my pacers. It brings me great joy just to do it. And I think the biggest thing I found was that when we strip it down, all the way down to the nitty gritty, when I strip it down to where I sat at Winfield halfway through Leadville, and I was just kind of in despair, what am I going to do to get myself out of this? I recognized that, at the bottom of it, it's just love, all about love. When debt hit, and when I said I got to pay my debts, it was, the love not only for running, but for my family, for my friends. And I said, I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing it for a bunch of others. I love this sport. I love doing it. I love running. I love being out here. I love the outdoors. But I really, truly, I love my family, and the the things that it shows them, the possibilities, and the way it makes them feel too. Like their pride in me and their joy for what I do, their celebrations of it as well. So it's, that's what really struck me was that, the feeling of that I get from running and from what it brings.
Mm-hmm. But what about the time on the clock? This is amazing. I want to dive deeper in with this because I just love this. You said that you're looking forward to Wasatch, and there's this feeling that we get as runners sometimes that you finish a really hard race and you get that thought that why do I do this, and I'm never doing this again, and that kind of diminishes, I think, over time if you stay in it. But it's a common emotion that a lot of runners feel.
Sure.
It's like you question why you're doing this, and when you finish the race, even if you did well, you're definitely not looking forward to the next one, at least in some fraction of the population. And you just finished doing something really difficult, like maybe the most difficult one thus far.
Sure. And
you're looking forward to the next one. But had you been like going for the time, even if you hit the time, who knows it, but it would probably be a different game. Yeah. So like tapping into the love is what gets you to look forward to the next one, and that is what gets you to do this Grand Slam, right?
No, totally.
If you lost touch with that,
it's
just
right.
4 races otherwise. But when when you're like expanding yourself, so like tapping into that emotion is
it's the passion, right? It's the passion for the sport, the love of running, the love, as I said, of being outside, of just experiencing this, of the camaraderie that you gain from being with your fellow runners and seeing their struggles. All of that, it's so powerful. And when you recognize that and how much you love doing it, it becomes a different piece. It's for a long time it was times. I chased times. I chased marathon times. I chased 50-mile times, whatever it was. That was big. But at the heart of it, when I recognized that it was, I just love this sport. I love running. I love where it brings me. I love what I see. I love who I meet. I love, the time I spend with people on the trail. Like, I love the places it takes my family and I, the experiences that we have outside of, the races themselves. When they get to travel to Lake Tahoe and spend 2 weeks and have a blast and have experiences of a lifetime. My father says to me all the time, you're just making these wonderful memories for your family and for yourself. It's something you can't replicate or take away, or where else can you do that? I mean, we go on family vacations and stuff, but man, I mean, just the memories that they have. My daughter, she tells her friends all these stories and stuff like that, and then they're, oh my gosh, you did this and that, and well, maybe that was a little bit blown up, but it's cool to share those experiences. And my daughter meeting Courtney Dauwalter after she won Western States.
So cool.
So she got a picture with her, and like you can't, like I said, you just can't replicate or take away those experiences. And so recognizing just how much you love it, and if you don't love it, it makes it a lot harder. If this is just something that you're like, I just want to check it off, it makes it tough, because when you get to that tough moment and you really have to go deep and decide, like, why am I moving forward? I mean, if you're just like trying to check a box, that's really tough. Like, you're gonna have a hard time finding the reason to keep moving forward. So really find that intrinsic value. What's it going to be that's going to keep you moving forward? And that's what got me going. Was just I recognized, all right, man, like there's a lot more to this than just your pain at the moment. So it's a tough place to come to, though. It really is. It's a tough thing to recognize, because some people don't love running, and I understand that. But it's quite the powerful thing, and maybe you can find something else. I mean, I was raising funds for the Challenged Athlete Foundation at Leadville, and that was amazing. We talked about earlier, seeing these amputees and stuff, and just incredible athletes, incredible people, incredible stories. I had a bracelet on from Olivia, who got a wheelchair. She had spina bifida, or she has spina bifida, and they gave her a racing wheelchair. The Challenged Athlete Foundation. So that's where funds go. And when I recognized like what I was raising money for, that became huge as well. And just looking down at that little bracelet, and I had her picture in my mind, it just it brought a smile on my face. So these little things, but it all comes back to love.
Yeah. Well said. That's beautiful. I've found it, and listening to your story here, it sounds similar to a journey that I've been on with like racing track, racing on the road, and it is about the time. And there's other experience in there as well.
Sure.
But shifting to ultras seemed to be, I don't know which one came first, but in the ultra world, I think that it's maybe easier to get more in touch, even more in touch. Not that you can't the other ways, but even more in touch. And like being out in nature, having the crew, like when your family's there, the family support is nice, but it's not like critically important in a half marathon.
Right.
But out there, like it brings you closer together. I get goosebumps as this. So did you find that like transitioning into more serious ultras was when that shift of like of your why into more of the love of like was birthed and then nurtured? You know, is that true?
I like because when I got into ultra, it was still about competing. You know, I really still wanted to be competitive, and but then as my family became more and more engaged with the process, with the races, and you know, being out there, it did change a lot. You know, like it became like, oh, I can't wait to get to the next aid station and see my kids or see my wife. You know, like it became a different. Like, you know, it was at like first it was like, oh man, like I just got to get to that next aid station so I can do this, and then keep going, right? Like then it evolved to I just, you know, I can't wait to see my wife, I can't wait to see my kids, you know, and then now it's just like, you know, it's just a cool experience anymore, you know, like. I mean, yeah, I'm still looking forward to seeing my family at the next aid station, but you know, it's also like enjoying the journey, enjoying the in-betweens. Because I think sometimes I forgot about that, you know, when I was racing, was just like taking in the scenery and enjoying the moment and being in the race and being grateful for the opportunity. And that's something that's really kind of grown more and more important to me, is just, you know, expressing my gratuity and expressing my gratefulness for, you know, all the blessings that I have and all the places I go and everything I see, and just being grateful for that. It's changed my mental process, because instead of like being in the moment and thinking about, you know, oh my gosh, like I'm only at mile whatever, you know, I think about, wow, look at this, like, you know, this is so, you know, it's so beautiful. Like I don't think about the mileage anymore. I think about where I'm at and look around, take a moment to recognize like I'm in the middle of Wisconsin. You know, like when on earth would I be in the middle of Wisconsin running through, you know, a cornfield? And just take the moment and recognize that, you know, I've got this great opportunity that I've been afforded, and I continue to do it. And I just want to continue to do it. So that's the big thing. It's like, you know, thinking about like, especially in the day in, day out, like what's going to keep me going? What do I got to do to keep myself healthy? And so, yeah, it's changed, it's evolved a lot, you know, but it's taken a long time.
Mm-hmm. How did that mindset of sort of like letting go of the competitiveness and being in the moment and not chasing the time as much, being aware of the time but not chasing it, and go to Leadville where you're trying to get off of Hope Pass before nighttime, which means you got to be looking at the clock all the way up until then, which was the you know, majority of the race, and those seem like they could conflict.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, I would say that you're right. Like the time, it was definitely like one of those things that everybody kept stressing, right? Like it was all around you. You were surrounded by it. But I had to stay in my moment and recognize my needs at that time, or else I wasn't gonna continue, right? Like, what was going on? What was my body telling me? I had to recognize the signals that, like, I think I'm a little bit dehydrated, you know, or I probably need some more electrolytes. Maybe I need some more calories, you know. So looking at all of the little system checks, right? Like going through and kind of making sure that helped me, because I was like, I'm doing what I need to do to make sure that I get to the finish line, rather than just saying like, oh my God, what's my watch reading, right? Like rather than that, I was looking at myself and saying, you know, are you doing what you need to stay on that? And, you know, just letting my body take care of the rest, because I was taking care of my body. if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So having the goal, and that goal is a time, a certain place on the course at a certain time, but like stepping behind that
Yep.
and knowing that the way to accomplish that is by still taking care of oneself.
Yes. Right.
And that is the way to
Yep.
run fast.
Yep. And so rather than worrying about how fast I was going, I was worried about, am I taking care of myself so that I can run?
How about the emotional component? So that's the system checks, but the way that you're feeling, also stepping behind the time on the clock
Yeah.
and knowing that that is there, even for like a road marathon or something. But then stepping behind and doing the system checks, the checking in with yourself,
Yeah.
so that you said letting go. What did you say? Let go of the competitiveness and enjoy this. And that also being a key to not just enjoy it, but also that can be the key. I would say that it probably is the key to actually run fast. And it's kind of like letting go of running fast in order to run fast.
Yeah.
But once you let it go, it kind of like doesn't matter. But can you talk
Yeah.
about the emotional
Sure.
component of the letting go?
Like this one was really tough because it was, Beth wasn't going to be there, my wife. So like that was a huge piece that I had to really keep in check. I get pretty emotional when I think about my wife and my kids. That's a really huge emotional draw for me. So I really had to keep that in check and remind myself, because a lot of times people feel guilty when they're away from their families. They're like, I'm taking time away from my families. Beth always gives me the okay. She says, I don't want you to get upset. Like, we are okay. We want you there. We want you to do this. We're all cheering for you, which in turn gives me the right of way to say, let's go and race. Let's go do this. If I didn't have that support, I probably would have a lot harder time with finishing, especially when it got hard, because I wouldn't feel that support. But knowing that I have my kids are behind me, they're like, go finish this, Dad. Like, get this done. And especially having my wife's support, like those are critical, to my emotional state. So that's the foundation. Having that ability to know that I'm okay to be out there, I'm okay to be racing and taking this time, errand time, if you will, because it's not family time, obviously. That really does help me. And then, keeping my emotions in check, it gets difficult, obviously, at times. Like I said, at Winfield, that was my most emotional. I was definitely I was really hard. I was looking around at everybody else, and they're in a really bad state. It was the most drops they ever had at that aid station. There were so many people that were pulled because of altitude sickness, dehydration. So it was a really big year for people going down there. And at the aid station, everybody was sitting in chairs, cramping, just moaning. Just like you heard a lot of people just talking negative. And that's when I thought, like, this isn't going to be good. Like, emotionally, physically, like, I'm not in a good place right here. Like, there's too much negativity surrounding me. Yeah. And that's when I recognized I got to move. I got to go. Like, this is time to move. And that's when, I thought about that statement. And so it took me a little while to collect myself, getting out of that aid station and going back up to Hope Pass. It wasn't like things turned around quick. I was really still struggling physically, mentally, emotionally. I was taxed, because I had really had to draw a lot from myself to get back going and get back up. And people started, there were some people that ran right out of there, and I was just like, that's not what I can do right now. I want to, but it wasn't physically possible. My legs weren't there, and I recognized that, and I was like, but what do I need to do? Like, I did everything I needed to do at that aid station, but what do I need to do right now so that I can get back to moving and can get back to feeling better? And so I just, again, went through myself and took care of those things. And then because I took care of myself, my emotional state started to come back around. I started to feel more comfortable and be like, I can do this. I can get back up. I can get back up to Hope Pass. I'm feeling stronger. And then all of a sudden I was like, okay, let's jog. And I was running, and I was like, I'm able to run at, these grades that I wasn't able to run at earlier. And my legs are coming back around. And that's what really spurred everything, physically, emotionally. It was just another 180. I won't say it was the last one, but it was definitely a 180 for every piece of me.
Yeah.
It all came together, as emotionally, physically, everything turned around, and I was able to get going and get back up, hope pass. But yeah, it took a lot, and it was just kind of recognizing where I was and not trying to force anything, because forcing it wasn't going to help.
Mm-hmm. There's this saying that I think is from Jim Rohn that says, "Stand guard at the door of your mind." Mm. And just because there are things happening around you, like maybe runners who are really struggling, but being really like the struggle is different from the negativity. That's, I would say, even a choice. And standing guard at the door of your mind means like, what are you going to allow into your psyche? Because that we can control that. Maybe you can't even control the leg cramp or the course or whatever, but we can control that. And your decision to sort of not allow those things into your psyche when you find yourself surrounded by that. It's like asking yourself, what do I need to do? But it's like, what do I need to also not allow in?
Yeah.
To just cultivate that centeredness so that you can keep going. And like when you lose that, that's when you can get in that downward spiral and the self-talk.
Yeah.
But when you stand guard at the door of your mind, it's like no matter what happens, there's a belief that I've found very useful that everything is always happening for me. So even if you were hurt or thrown up or whatever, it's like, well, at least I'm thrown up. I weigh a pound lighter. That's 2 seconds per mile per pound. Yeah, I'll finish faster. It's like just finding it, and not just like pretending that you find it, but actually cultivating the internal state of what is this experience to me. Yeah. And sometimes that does mean like a letting go. And it seems amazing to me in a race how pervasive those thoughts can kind of be. One of my clients spoke to me yesterday, and she had just run a PR in the half marathon. And there was one of her friends who's like a rival, I guess. She always thought of this other girl as being much faster than her because she was. And at mile, whatever it was, 7 or something like that, she caught up to this girl, and she had all this negative talk, like complaining about this, and I hate running. And I think a lot of runners do this, like they think it's in jest, not in jest, but like in.
Yes.
And so my client, she ran by, she ended up finishing like well ahead of her, because she said when she heard that, she knew that wasn't for her, that she couldn't run with her. Mm-hmm. And like, God bless her, but she's in her own space, and I need to cultivate this good feeling. And the result was that she ran a really great race. Sometimes the result might not be, you might blow up, whatever, but sure. It is the way to the fulfillment, because time on the clock or not, she was very excited about it. That she had done so well and cultivated. She was kind of excited in a token way that she had beat her friend, but mostly about who she had become in order to be able to do that. And cultivating that focus, I think, is a very high level thing to do.
Yeah, you got to recognize negative space. It was early in the race, and I was kind of in the Congo line. We were going around Lake Turquoise, which is very early on in the race. Yep. And there was a runner that pulled out poles like super early, and that was not very cognizant of where the poles were going, which was putting me in a negative space because I was more concerned about the poles and this runner than what was going on around me, or myself for that matter. So I recognized that. I was like, this guy is putting me in a negative space. I'm not liking the way my emotions are right now. So I removed myself from that situation. I stopped and went to the bathroom and let him get ahead. I caught him again at the aid station, and then it was a nice section. I just ran, got my space from this runner, and never saw the runner again. But it removed myself from that situation because I recognized that I was starting to gain negative emotions, and I was like, I don't like this headspace, especially this early on in the race. So yeah, just recognizing what you're feeling at the moment, and removing yourself from that situation, however you need to do it. I think that's something you have to get better at, because if you stay in that space, it just starts to, like you said, spiral.
Yeah, and there's 2 ways to get away from it. You could draw back, or you could sprint ahead.
Right. Yep.
And I've tried both with myself, and the problem is with getting ahead and leaving that person behind is like, oh shit, if I can't maintain this, you're kind of worried that they're going to catch you again and you're going to be pissed off again. Right. And so there's even a blessing in this, that by letting him go, it's like you're also more likely to like move towards a negative split. Like be more conservative with your pacing, and that keep something in the bank, so that if something does come up later on, you have the ability to run away from it.
Mm-hmm.
And that choice between either dropping back or going ahead is an interesting one. I think it takes maybe experience or discipline or just self-knowledge to choose the dropping back one,
right?
Because it feels better to like be higher up.
Oh, it does. Right? It does. I was so early in that race, I really wasn't too concerned with losing a few seconds or minutes, but like it was also time to relieve myself, so it worked out well.
Yeah. See, everything's working out.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So let's close it off here with just looking forward into what you're gonna when you're wrapping up. It honestly sounds like you've got everything that you've set out to get. It's like you've already accomplished before the end of the thing is done, and it's this really cool script flip where oftentimes we think we need to get something in order to feel something. And it's not just in running, right? With relationships, finance, spiritual development, whatever.
Sure.
If I have this, if I get the $1 million, if I get the pretty girl, whatever it is, it's like then, if this happens, then I'll feel a certain way. And you've already, like the feelings that you're after, you're already experiencing them in the races and along the way.
Yeah.
So it's like when you get to your fourth finish line, it almost like doesn't matter, because you have the feelings. Because if the outcome is to run those races so that you can be accomplished and all these things, right? But you already have that. So what happens from here? Like, this is already a success when it's done? It's kind of like open. Where does it go?
Well, so I think part of it is that like any which way it goes, if I had a DNF, God forbid, at Wasatch, I'd be okay with that. Like some people say that, but I recognize it's a possibility. Like that can happen, and I have to be okay with that too. I mean, yeah, I'd be upset, of course. There's no, that's human nature, but like it's a possibility. So, recognizing that there is possibility for success and failure is part of this. Like you have to understand that it can go either way. But that said, like I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that I can have the most successful day, right? Like I'm doing everything I can to control the controllables. And if something uncontrollable happened, then, I have to either try to address it or, accept the consequence. Mm-hmm. But, when I look at this, it's not to say that I am successful or unsuccessful if I finish. Like that's part of it too. Like I am happy that I had the opportunity. Like not a lot of people have this opportunity to be able to do a Grand Slam. Like, it takes a lot, time commitment, finances. There's all the logistics of it. It's really challenging. So like I have to recognize that too. I mean, as we talked about earlier, there's only 6 of us left out of the 17 that started. Yeah. It's hard. Like that's part of it, right? That's part of the challenge, and accepting that challenge and recognizing along the way, like, oh my gosh, I've done so many cool things already. So, I mean, 3 out of these 4 races, it's like, I mean, I've already done some amazing races. And again, just going back to being grateful and just saying like, I'm grateful for all of that, and saying I'm grateful for the next opportunity, and just, going into the race saying, okay, like I'm here, I'm in the moment, and just staying there, right? Like if I'm in mile 1, I'm not thinking about mile 2. Like I'm in mile 1, and I have to say, let's get through mile 1. So just taking it step by step, just as we do in life, right? Take it step by step and keep moving forward. Just do everything you can to make sure that you're going to stay positive, right? Like what's detracting from you at the moment, just like we just talked about. What are the negatives? Like what's bothering you? How can you get out of that? What do you need to do to stay into that positive and that positive frame of mind? And what do you need to do to keep moving forward? Right? Like it's not asking why, it's asking what do I need? Not why am I doing this? That should have been established a long time ago, right? Like when people ask like, why am I doing this? That should have been answered a long time ago.
Yeah.
Just ask, what do you need at that moment, right? Like
asking a better question.
Asking a better question.
And that shifts your mind.
Yep.
Why am I here? Why does this suck so bad?
Yeah.
What can I be grateful for?
Right.
Just like the question you ask yourself brings it in.
It does. It frames it. Yep.
Wow. Fantastic way to end this. The last things that you just said about being in gratitude and being present to the moment and tapping into love and staying positive. It's like these things, you hear these in every walk of life where someone is very, not just successful, but fulfilled. And there's a major difference. But having success and fulfillment, these are like common things. And you've like tapped into this very well.
Thanks, man.
So thank you for sharing your journey with us. It's inspiring. I love so much, like, honestly, that you have become this kind of person that I know you. It's like, it's for so much more than, it's the art of running. It's the fulfillment through running. And I think that if we made it to the end of our life being very successful, but not being fulfilled, that seems like a failure, you know?
Yeah.
And so focusing on this fulfillment is not easy to do because sometimes you have to let go of the things that the mind wants. And it's inspiring to hear your story. Thank you.
Thank
you so much. Would you like to share where people can find you?
Oh, sure.
I'll follow you.
Yeah. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram. Just look Aaron Saft. That's my socials. I'm on Strava. If you want to follow along, ask questions. A lot of people ask me, like, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? My website is runningislife.run. You follow along on my podcast too, Running is Life Podcast.
There's a .run. We can do that.
Yes. Online. Yeah, isn't that cool?
Didn't even know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely, Andrew. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Take care.
I want to thank Andrew for interviewing me once again. Again, follow him. Andrew Snow on YouTube, Run Elite. He's just got a lot of great stuff. He's a really, dynamic person and really love being his friend. So really enjoyed that episode. So thank you, Andrew, for letting me have the recording so I could share this with my listeners. So I hope you really enjoyed that. Give Andrew a follow. As I said, I'll have everything in the show notes. This episode, I am pre-recording because as this releases, I am over in Italy for my brother's wedding. And I will be traveling back on Labor Day and then heading to Utah almost the next day for the Wasatch 100 to try to complete the Grand Slam. So my next episode will be with Thomas Brown, and we talk about Wasatch pre-run, everything that we can think of, the course, elevation change, all different things. They actually have a list on the Wasatch 100 website, which I'll link in the show notes as well on that episode, that talks about the top 10 reasons people DNF at Wasatch and what we're doing to plan to mitigate that. So that will be our next episode here. I think it's going to be, actually it's 186. Man, it's we're approaching 200, which is super exciting. So that's our next episode coming up. Everything else, recovering from Leadville, it's coming along. This is I'm recording this a week after Leadville, and I went for a run with my wife today, about 3 miles. We walked one of the big uphills. That was, it was good for me and it was good for my wife because she's been having a calf problem. But other than that, it's coming around. I'm doing well, and I'm really looking forward to Wasatch, just finishing up this series. After Wasatch, I'll have a post-race commentary for the following episode, and then we'll probably get back together with Thomas and just kind of talk through the whole Grand Slam. Talk about what we learned, what it put us through, all that kind of stuff. Share some memories and thoughts. So we'll be wrapping up the Grand Slam. So I hope all of you are well. If you have any questions or comments, please, let me know. The show notes have how to communicate with me. If you have questions about coaching, anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Understand that it's during this time, obviously I'm traveling. I probably won't take on any new clients until after Wasatch, which is the beginning of September. So, be looking at, if you wanted to get on board, it would probably be mid to late September, early October before I could get anybody back on board right now. It's just with the way things are, I want to make sure that we take care of you properly, that, I can communicate with you and get things done right. So, anyway, I really thank you for listening. I thank you all, guys, for all of your support and everything that you mean to me. I want to thank my Patreon supporters for keeping this going. It really is an honor and a privilege to be able to do this. I really enjoy doing it. So thank you. And until next time, keep running and keep moving forward, my friends.